All right. Well, welcome everybody. We have an esteemed panel here today. Those of you that know me, I'm Renegade Wigman. I'm taking the lead on this stream today, but also got some very, very good guests and collaborators here in the house. So I'll start by introducing Mark. How are you doing today, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, anytime, anytime. And Bentley, glad to see you here. How are you?
Fantastic. Yourself?
Most well, most well. And last but not least, Mr. Kevin. How goes it today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm unable to have a bad day these days, but excited about this show because I think this subject is going to hit home for a lot of people.
Yeah, I know. And, really, just perfect segue right there into today's topic, which is how to deal with toxic family members, which is always going to be slightly different than how you deal with, toxic people in general, because members are always going to be a more personal dynamic, and also with toxic friends or other toxic people you may meet or interact with in your life, there's a certain level of separation that you can kind of step away from. But when it comes to family members, it literally does hit home. And so, today we really want to talk and dive into this topic, because it's definitely something a lot of people are dealing with, and have dealt with, and it's just nature of the beast of being a human being. No one have I ever met, myself included, does not have a toxic family member or two in there. So we the best routes and strategies that we've all had to deal with, are developed to deal with those types of individuals. And what can we actually do? That's really what we kind of want to hone in and focus in on today. But Mark, since you're our guest today, I kind of want to start with you. If you have an example of a toxic family member that you've had to deal with, and what was the nature of that toxicity, as well as how did you deal with that situation?
Well, I was thinking about it while you were speaking, and actually, in my immediate family, I don't think I had any. Like my mother and father, they pretty well left me alone to do what I wanted to. I would have to say the only toxic members I had were the ones I was married to. Yeah, and I'm
Hey,
telling you,
it counts.
yeah, they'll drag you down. But then I have to ask myself, what is it in me that drew that person to me? But I'll say this, being divorced from them now, looking back in retrospect, it was the best thing that happened to me because it taught me a lot about myself. But while in the relationship, you have to realize you can't change anybody. And I think sometimes us men have a tendency to look at people and be attracted to them for their potential or for what they say they want to become instead of what they are. So, but once you get into the relationship and they realize the toxic person that it's going to take a lot of effort to become what they thought they wanted to become when they married you, that's when you run into trouble. And it's really hard to deal with that when you're married to the person. Um, Really, what you have to do is keep your focus on what you need to do and just try not to be affected by her toxicity, which is hard to do if you have kids with that person. And a lot of times this doesn't come out until you've been married for quite some time, maybe a few years or even longer than. I think I was married to the last one for 12 years. And actually it was about 6 years before I really started noticing it. Of course, I try to control it. You can't do that. Really, you just have to keep your side of the street clean and focus on what you need to do. And of course, if you're married to the person, you really can't limit the time. So there's really no way to avoid that, as in contrast, if it's with a family member that you like, your mom or your dad that you're not living with, you can distance yourself from those people. Um, Very difficult if you're married to the person. So I ended up getting a divorce, but I I know people that can live with people that are toxic or that have issues like that, and what they do is focus on themselves and keep themselves, how would I say, spiritually and physically in order. And somehow or
Mhm.
another, they manage to live with these people without being affected by them so much. But that's the only way I can see it can be done. I haven't been able to do it like that, but I see people do it.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
very, very interesting. Yeah, Bentley, I'll pass the baton to you. Is there a specific example that comes to mind when it comes to a toxic family member and how you've had to deal with that?
Yeah, I too can relate with Mark. I was married to one, had that same sort of thing, and equally the same. Didn't really realize it at first, because people do change slightly over time. They get comfortable with situations and who you are, and start to take advantage of that they might not in the beginning. So sometimes you end up in one that you didn't really have the warning signs to avoid. Other times, like you say, Mark, and that's a great point of what is it that I am doing to attract this? At least from a friendship, relationship, spousal relationship, romantic relationship, that you're attracting it. Uh, it's the age old saying is, you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. You're born with them. So if you have toxic relationships there, which I also did as well in my past, and still do. They're family members, so they're going to be there until one of us is gone, or both of us. And it's difficult with family because you're related, you're expected to do things, uh, but at some point you've got to come to an understanding for yourself that this isn't healthy for me, and um, can get into the scenario where you actually can enable somebody who is toxic. If you've got somebody who in your family, especially the family member, because you're so committed to them. If you got a family member who has a toxic personality and they suck you in with that, if you continue to support that person, through strength, communication, whatever the case may be, you're actually promoting that and enabling that toxicity. So, and that becomes very difficult to actually separate yourself and step away from it and realize you're actually not helping the situation. You're actually compounding it. And so there's a little bit of accountability on that side for yourself.
Now, you guys both raised a very interesting question with your experiences, especially when it comes to right the toxicity manifesting itself at a later stage. Was looking back on those experiences, would you guys say that possibly there were potentially warning signs that were there, but were kind of turned a blind eye to, or was it more of the situation eventually devolved into something a little bit more toxic or unhealthy? Or because again, people react to stress right different ways, so sometimes things are going great and then a stressful situation comes, one person handles it, rises to the occasion, the other person just completely implodes on it. From your guys' experiences, because I'm sure there are a lot of guys right now that are like, oh my gosh, like I just got married last week, are you guys telling me I'm doomed to like discover something like years down the line that I'm not seeing now? So looking back on it, are there any like sort of warning signs or any like situational awareness that may have like contributed or led to that, that you guys could point out?
Well, as I listen to you speak, it reminds me of the old saying, "Love is blind." So what happens? Yeah, when you meet someone and you're all fired up and you only focus on the good in them. And of course, after you're married and you live together for a long time, you start seeing these things that maybe some things that you thought were cute and they start annoying you. And then sometimes it's actually, I'll take my how do I say, take responsibility for some of it, because when you're in a relationship and there's something about your spouse that you don't like, you start focusing on that, actually it'll grow. So what you need to do is the same thing you do when you met the person, is try to ignore the things you don't like and focus on what you do like, because it expands that. But that's hard to do when, let's say, she's out running up the credit cards or something and you got to pay the bill and there's more, what do they say, there's more month than there is money at the end of the month. But I was thinking as you were speaking about my kids. I have 6 kids I've raised for the last 12 years by myself.
Wow.
And there are three. The three young ones are very much different than the three older ones. And
Mm.
they get in those three, or even the two of them out of three or three, get in the room. They cannot get in the room without starting to bicker and fight. And the way I handle that is I make them leave, or I'll get up and leave. That's just the way they are. They just, and they even say, well, we're not arguing, but it always turns into an argument. They're just, I don't want to call them toxic, but they're just, but I guess you could use that word. You get those three.
Rambunctiously combative.
And when they were real little and I had to go to a meeting or something, I'd have to take them with me. And there were certain ones I could take together and certain ones I couldn't. That's one thing or a way you can deal with toxic people too is to not get them get together with a certain group at the same time, because sometimes one may be okay by themselves, but you get two of them together, then they become toxic. Or I don't know how that works, but so that's what I do with the kids. But of course, you can't do with the adults. You have to exit you yourself have to exit. But in this case, I can leave the room, or I can make the kids leave. So people sometimes get together and they're toxic together, but they're okay apart. And they say if you get two sick people or two toxic people together, they become more toxic, or they become sicker, however you choose to view it.
Yeah.
That's good insight there.
Absolutely. In my case, with my now ex-spouse, you're right on that one, Renegade, where it was a stressor. We had a stressor, I have a big swing and a big change on things. And it took something that, hindsight looking back, I can say, well, I noticed this before the really big on this side. But without the stressor, it was this big. The stressor was what caused it to get to this. So in a case like that, was there a warning sign? Hindsight could say, yeah, there was. But if you remove the stressor, was it really a warning sign? And would it have ever got to that point? It's a question that I can't answer, and never can and never will be able to in that particular case. So, sometimes there are warning signs, and sometimes the warning signs are something you won't pay attention to because they are too small until that stressor kicks in.
Yeah. Okay. It's yeah. I mean, I've definitely found in my personal experience where it's like when I'm on top of my game and everything is going great, things are good. It keeps everything in check and balance in the ecosystem. And then sometimes where I have to take the personal accountability on myself, is like, oh, I'm a little bit slipping. And suddenly all these things start popping up, and I'm like, okay. Me being on top of it keeps it at bay. But then there have been other situations where you get romantically involved and you're just like off the bat, kind of like, no, there's me even running at the top of my game is not going to keep this in check. So you know what? We're on two different pathways. But Sir Kevin, how have you had to deal with toxic people in your life, and what lessons have you learned from that?
Well, of course, we just like everybody else on the panel. I had my practice wife, the first wife. But one thing that we haven't addressed is that toxic doesn't necessarily mean abusive. It doesn't mean hurtful. Some people, some of the types of toxic people, like the criticizer, or the people that plays the victim. If you get two of those people together, their toxicity grows with each other.
Yeah.
But now when you're growing up with a toxic person, whether it be a parent or somebody's close, the main thing that you can take from that is to learn from it. Because as a young person or as a child, there's nothing much you can do about it. And if you let it affect you, it will affect you in your young adult life until you can change that. And the faster you can change the example that you were maybe brought up with or saw growing up, the better off you'll be. Because one thing I make no bones about admitting is, in my relationship, I was probably the toxic one, because I was very short-tempered. Wasn't very emotionally intelligent at that point in my young 20s, which most men aren't. Which my biggest advice to guys today, if you're going to get married, wait till you're at least 30. Because I think the studies are ring true that females do mature a little bit faster than males. And so when you marry the high school sweetheart, when you know each other in and out, you really start to take each other for granted, especially when you've been together for a decade, 12 years, and you're toxic and you don't even know it. So, and a lot of it for me is, I'm not blaming, but it's because what I saw growing up, I thought that's the way it was supposed to be. Growing up in a lower to middle class family, you think you're supposed to come home pissed off from work every day because you just hate your job and hate everything. And I wasn't even in that position that I didn't hate my job, but I still treated life like that, if that makes sense. So for me, learning from the experience and from the people, because a lot of times if it's immediate family members, you can't change the stripes on a tiger. So as long as you can forgive but not forget, but then learn from the experience and not apply it to your own life, I think that's probably the most important thing that you can take out of
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree wholeheartedly with that. It's especially the family dynamic is always interesting, right? Whether it's your parents or your siblings or cousins, right, or extended family, right? Your in-laws, right? Because I'm sure everybody has in-laws that they all just absolutely love and just have nothing bad to say about, right? But that's where the holidays, right, gets to be a real super stressful time for a lot of people because they do come from an environment of um, you know unfortunately like toxic people. And when we're saying toxic, usually it's more of like around a sentiment of strong negativity throughout their actions, the way in which they interact with the world or the lens that they view the world through. I know for a lot of you guys that are on your path and you're trying to stay focused and come up, it gets really hard to stay focused when you're in that environment. Or again, they've done a ton of studies to show like stress, especially for kids as they're growing up, like or humans in general, when you live in a stressful environment, it does have deep psychological effects on you. So for me, what I've found to be a very effective strategy with dealing with toxic people is one, you have to accept it, where it's like, hey, these people are who they are. I'm not really gonna like change them or try and come and show them light or this, that, or the other. But two, prioritizing my own self and making sure that hey, I need to make sure my mental sanity and my productivity keeps me on my path, because at the end of the day, toxicity from other people will be a distraction that can knock you off and drag you down and develop you into that type of person that you really don't want to be. And then the third part is, just trying to mitigate your time wherever possible. For some of you, right, you're at home and, not necessarily the best situation or best environment. And so there's not much you can really do on that front. And that's unfortunate. But fortunately, there are a lot of resources out there. And with, the power of the internet, there are communities out there where you can reach to get some type of outlet before you can get, onto your own pathway. And sometimes you have to take action. So for me, example I use is an example of my mom. So she was an orphan and grew up in the foster care system in the 1960s, which at the time was a very wild and drastically different thing than what people think of it now. At the time it was very much like people can just drop their kids off at the orphanage because like, oh well, we just don't want to like have them at the home. We'll come visit them once a month. And then, they'll be like crying and screaming, like, why can't we go home? But, we're just, so it was a very, very different era. And so very abusive background, place, just not a good spot or situation. But then, at 15, she legally emancipated herself and put herself in college because she knew education was going to be her ticket on the way out. And so from there, she did that, never looked back. So for me, that was always like kind of my example, sort of like growing up, where I was like, damn, like if I think I'm like doing bad or whatever, it's like, oh, I was kind of a badass, like doing this, this, and this. But I also internalized a lot of those, lessons because again, I've had toxic family members that I've had to deal with, where it's like, okay, I just need to limit the time and not, ensure that I'm not enabling the situation, and enforcing personal boundaries is definitely something that, not necessarily saying like you have to get physical or get into a fight, but you do have to let people know, like, hey, this is kind of like where my personal line is. So at least there's a little layer of resistance. So they kind of know like if they're going to bump up against it, it's not necessarily going to be smooth sailing. But what types of we mentioned a couple here, like enablers and criticizers. What other types of toxic individuals have you guys noticed or come across?
Well, I think we talked about the criticizer, and a lot of times when it comes to toxic family members, excluding spouses, now of course they can be spouses, but usually it's the criticizer is the one that is young kids as you're growing up, even young adults, they have dreams. The criticizer can be the one that every time they come up with a new dream or something they want to do, instead of encouraging them, unless it's outlandish, of course, instead of encouraging them and trying to put them on the path where they can reach it, they just criticize it and why it won't work and why you can't do it. I think those are probably one of the worst types of toxic people in general, but also family members. Because especially when you're young and your family member is older than you almostly and inherently look up to them because you don't know about backgrounds, you don't know about real life yet. So critical people can really tear you down, especially if you take it to heart. So, I mean, the criticizer, I think, would probably be to me, besides the abusive type of person, that could probably be one of the worst.
I would agree with that 100%. In all reality, a criticizer, like you say, Kevin, somebody that puts you down and kills your dreams, especially when you're young. Even if it's not something that they know how to accomplish, that psychological abuse, and that's literally what it is. As long as your dreams aren't something that are absolutely unachievable, as long as they're a realistic dream, but a very ambitious one, it's going to take some work. Somebody constantly killing your dreams and that psychological abuse will stay with you for the rest of your life. Those little scars go a long way. They cut really deep, and they're very difficult to heal from.
Yeah, so, I really agree. And just to add to that, I didn't bring in the spouse at the first part, but and this might not even be the criticizer, but say you're married to someone, and us as men, a lot of us are ambitious. I know a lot of us in the men now are very ambitious. A spouse can be toxic if you say, okay, I know we're doing good at this job, but I want to move to this company and I can probably get promoted faster, or even better yet, I want to start my own business. But if you have the naysayer spouse that every time you want to do something that you feel would be better for the family, the marriage, the finances, and they shoot it down, that's, for a man, that's probably one of the worst spouses you could have, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. I never thought about it, but when you were speaking, my mother was somewhat, I never considered it toxic, but maybe it was. I remember when I first started boxing, she was down there watching me punch the bag, and she says, "What are you going to do that for?" She says, "What's that going to amount to?" It's like you quit everything you ever started, although she was probably right about that. But, because she said that to me, that made me not want to quit. So I didn't quit. And she came to watch me fight. And one night I got knocked out. And she was probably wishing I would have quit it, but I didn't quit it. So, yeah, I'm very careful. Maybe it's because of that who I tell what my dreams are. I make sure, and I don't share them with too many people. And I usually don't share them with anybody unless I need their support or their help to accomplish it. Because most people are not dreamers. Are not, what is it, less than 1% of the people have written goals. So you start sharing something that sounds outlandish or out of the norm, and most people are going to start lining up the reasons why you can't do it. So I even have a really good friend he's a good friend, but I don't share, because he's a practical guy. He's the vice president of the bank. So he's more on the pessimistic side about when it comes to taking risks. So that's kind of his job. But I don't share certain things with him because I know he looks at things really, how would I say, logical and practical. And as you guys know, if you're going to do something out of the norm, you got to get out of the logical and practical, and you got to be willing to take a risk, and you got to be willing to keep your eye on the vision and not on which is inside your mind, and not on what's out here in the world that says, hey, you can't do this. If we didn't have visionaries, we wouldn't be flying, we wouldn't be driving cars and everything else that we have. So yeah, there's always those toxic people, if you want to call them that, are going to line up the reasons and for the reason you can't do something. So you must be careful about who you tell what.
And you want to thoroughly vet out what you want to do as well, just because there's certain considerations, because sometimes you could be the toxic one, right? Where it's like, hey, I've got, my wife, and we've got 2 kids, a third one on the way, and I'm just going to completely quit my job to pursue my dream to be a rapper. It's like, whoa. Like, okay, it's good that, you have a dream and you want to nurture some talent, but also at the same time, if, often like moving around from like home to home or motel to motel, like dragging your kids to that, you're creating a very toxic environment for them, and you're gonna wind up being like the one that everybody's like, yeah, you didn't execute the best on that one. So definitely do take some. It's good to take some good considerations on things, so that way you can avoid being like that person. But I 100% agree with you guys, where more often than not, you'll come across like people that will constantly try to kill your dreams, or say like, why do you want to do that, that's dumb, like why don't you just do this instead, why don't you just be like everybody else, or why don't you just quit that idea because it's never going to go anywhere. So you'll always like regret not trying versus going for it and then it not working out, and you figure out, okay, there's something else better suited for you, because you learn a lot through that experience in that process. um but yeah, what
Most
you're gonna
people
say
have
something?
a false sense of security. Let's say, take an example for a job and someone who wants to start their own business. I had a guy ask me this once when I started years ago in '85. How can you stand not knowing if you're going to be working tomorrow? Now, he was under the assumption, because he worked for a big company, Monsanto, that he was going to be working tomorrow. But since I've been in business since '85, and that was back in '85, Monsanto has changed hands many times. They've laid him off and it's been bought out by different. But anyway, he retired from there. It was my brother. But I understand that. But they have this false sense of security, and there is no security. The only security you're going to find is within yourself, or with your God, if you believe in that, which works for me. So you have to be willing to take a risk. And as you say, a calculated risk, of course, but you never know. It's kind of like Martin Luther King Jr. says, you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. And so many people never take the first step because they don't see how it's going to work out. If you have to know how you're going to get to your goal, although I believe in planning, you'll never take that step. You'll never move because you're not going to know how. You have to have a plan, but it has to be flexible. And you have to allow for God's guidance through the plan.
Yeah, that's very good. I like that. You're touching on something we started the year off with, helping some of our guys in our group with a goal and developing a plan, and or as I like to call it, a roadmap, because
Right.
plans are very rigid. Roadmaps, you come to an obstacle, you can work your way around it, right? Where plans are a little more rigid. So, and you're right. You've got to. You maybe don't need to know the entire thing, but you got to be able to break it down to what the next couple of steps are. And when you get there, you could see the further steps. And one thing I've noticed as well, I kind of like, is every one of us is actually mentioned, and I'm not sure a lot of people realize this. Maybe you guys didn't yourself. Every one of us has mentioned that there is a part of ourselves that either was or could be the toxic one in the relationship, or we have toxic tendencies ourselves and we're aware of them. So that in itself is a very positive thing, because if you can recognize it in yourself, you'll have a lot easier time recognizing it on other people. And you'll probably also have better coping skills for dealing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well said. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Billy, because I know for me, about 10 years ago, I just started reading a lot and stopped, put down the John Grisham and started picking up the Robert Kiyosaki and the Donald Trump and the self-help books, the things that helped me learn about myself, to identify. Because I think the first step in solving anything is identify the problem. You can't assess anything unless you identify the problem and truly do it. And going back to what you were talking about, Mark, if you've got somebody that has a history in your family for tearing you down, yeah, don't tell them your plans. Tell them after you've done it. It's always fun to share your plans and goals with people, but if they're not going to be on board and they're not going to be there to assist you, why do they even know? I think Justin Waller, which is a pretty big member of another community out there, the War Room and the Real World. I mean, he even said that. He said, he uses a lot more foul language than I. Stop telling your fucking friends your plan. They don't need to know.
Right.
Tell them after you've done, because they're going to ask, instead of telling their plan on how to get there and let them ruin it for you, get there and then have them ask you how you did it so they can learn from you.
I think it dissipates the energy too within myself when I share it with someone, because it's like a secret. If you have a secret you don't want anybody to know, let's say it's something you'd be ashamed for people to know. It's good to share that with one person because it dissipates the power that shame or whatever that secret holds, guilt. And then the opposite is true too. If you keep that secret of a goal and where you want to go, that maintains that power. As if you tell everyone about it, it dissipates the power and the energy you need to accomplish that goal. That's just
Very
my,
well said. Very well said.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
very,
That's well said.
that's
You know,
very-
yeah. You have
what's
heard the
your,
enemy without unless there's an enemy within. You could relate that to toxicity. You don't draw toxic people into your life unless you've got some toxicity within yourself. Everyone is your teacher. So especially that person that annoys the hell out of you and is toxic, you got to ask yourself, what is it in me that has brought this person to me, and what can I learn from them? But what do most people do? They want to blame that person and sit there and tell you all the terrible things they did, how terrible they are, and that doesn't help us any. But it negates the responsibility I need to take. Why is this person drawn to me? Yeah, I had a lot of toxicity in myself, and I was thinking as you gentlemen were talking, I grew up with my dad was an alcoholic, a functional alcoholic, and him and mom fought all the time. So as I grew up, I think I found myself comfortable in these situations. I would find a woman who was emotionally unavailable, which was toxic because that was what I saw growing up was this fighting. Never anything physical, but I heard it when I was a kid, laying in bed, the fighting, the yelling, and that kind of stuff. So one of you said it has a lot to do with what we've learned as when we're children, when we're in that impression period, when we don't have the conscious ability to say this is true or false or this is good or bad. We just take it in and it imprints on us. And then we have a tendency to play that out in life. But that's where you need to look within. Why am I doing this? What am I repeating here? What am I trying to replay from my childhood so I can fix it or whatever I'm doing?
yeah, and that's definitely an interesting, like, toxic personality type that you kind of touched on too, is right? The perpetual victim, right? Because it's always like the world is in this grand conspiracy against me and everything is, constantly going wrong and this, that, or the other. And again, you want to like help or you try to be empathetic and help, and then they wind up turning it on you, right? And so it's just like, whoa, where did this all come from? So, that's definitely another, toxic personality type to be wary of, which I'm sure
Yeah,
you've all dealt
it's
with.
number 5 on my list on the document that I've created that I'm going to put on our forum at the Men of Now. It goes over 10 different types of toxic people, and you can read that. It gives a little bit brief description of their traits. And then it also 8 steps on how to deal with toxic family members or toxic people in your life. Because we're dealing mainly with family members today, because here's the easy thing. If that person calls you your friend, their friend, your friend, but they're toxic, they're not your friend. You can easily exclude them from your life. And I recommend that you do that. But that's the great thing about having the forums and the communities that we're building, like at the Men of Now, where you have a community of men that you can take your goals to, and you're never going to be criticized unless it's so outlandish that we're going to tell you that we're going to help you get there. We're going to be there with you every step of the way. And we want to see you win. And I think that the past and what's coming up recently with the patriarchy and the other side of the groups that have shown up, groups like this are becoming more important to men.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think men don't get the opportunity to fellowship together like they used to. When I grew up, the men would get together every evening after work, and there would be 10, 15, or 20. And I would be with my father, and they'd all sit around and talk for 2 or 3 hours at a time. Of course, they'd be drinking a few beers too, but that's just what they did. And we don't have that anymore. We don't have that fellowship of men. I'm fortunate. My kids, they're grown. Well, the oldest is 23, and the rest of them are younger. But they work for my company. They work with me in the company, and we actually get to speak and fellowship as men. And that's something that's really lacking in our society today.
yeah, that I agree with completely.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
Sorry. Yeah, no, that I agree with completely, Mark. I myself, I grew up on a family farm, very rural, very isolated condition. And yeah, growing up as a young guy, the men got together. We'd sit around, drink coffee, drink a beer, shoot the breeze in the fields and things like that. And there was, you learned skills from, you know, like you said, 20 different men around, and you saw things from different angles and learned different methods, because something we talk about on a regular basis is there is no one path to success. You have to create your own, and success leaves clues. You can take bits and pieces from this person and that person and that person, put it together to create your own, because you can never duplicate somebody else's. You need to create your own. And if you
Right.
don't have examples, you don't know how to put it together.
Yeah, and definitely would want to emphasize out there for you guys out there that may be in a situations with toxic family members, and you're learning some stuff here from it. There is and can be light at the tunnel. Usually, when you
Mhm.
maximize yourself and become the best version of yourself, that can really help alleviate a lot of situations where sometimes you always have to understand where other people are coming from. And yeah, sometimes it sucks that you have to be like the brunt or tail end of it, right? Like we've all, had people that are, abusive, or especially when they get a little intoxicated, suddenly the whole anger, rage, and everything comes out. But usually it's because they're dealing with something internally, and you just happen to be the collateral damage of the war they're having with themselves. So if
Right.
you have a little bit of understanding around that, you can maximize yourself to the best version. And sometimes cutting off that contact is a little bit of a sounds harsh, but at the same time, it's like what jolts them into like realizing like, oh, okay, like I've abused my, familial credit with this person. So now I need to like really rethink where things are at and how things are going. So, and again, not always or all situations, because everyone's got a different learning curve. But definitely in some situations, there can be situations that were toxic, and if you focus on yourself, maximizing yourself, you can come back to it, and then that person can be in a better place or position. So there definitely can be some light at the end of the tunnel there. We don't want it to be like doom and gloom here today.
Yeah. No, and that's 100% correct. Just like we've all identified that we have toxic bits and pieces of ourselves and tendencies, and that sort of has a tendency to attract some of the stuff that we don't want, the toxic we don't want. If you are working on yourself and improving yourself and making yourself the best version that you can, and trying to get better every day, the same thing happens. You will attract those people as well, which
Right.
will really help you separate out that toxicity and do like Kevin was talking about, where you've got your group and you share your goals, and you've got a group of people who will help you break them down into steps and achieve them. And if you get run up against the wall, a hurdle you don't know how to get over, you've got a group of people that'll help you get there, as opposed to knocking you down. And, it's, you can use it as a motivator.
Yeah, we need people to call us out, I think, because my boys, they'll call me out if I get on a negative rant, because sometimes I can't see it, and that's spewing out toxicity. Maybe something doesn't go right. I'm a little bit of a bad mood, or I'm tired, and I'll start going off about something. And in my mind, I don't think I'm complaining, but they can see it, so they tell me. It pisses me off, but they're right. But we need people
Now,
to be honest with us and say, "Hey, look what you're doing."
that raises a really interesting question is, so as a parent, how do you try to, shield your children from, other toxic individuals, as well as like, your inner toxicity? Like right there, you're talking about, hey, they're kind of like your buffer, like kind of call you out. But, I'm sure as a parent, you have a very different and unique perspective when it's like, okay, I'm responsible for these other people now. How do I shield them from like this crazy world we're living in?
Well, it's pretty hard to do it. It makes me think of an example the other night, but the one that I was talking to, he's 22, but he's boxing, and he has a good friend. They've been friends for 5, 6 years. We've lived here 10 years, and of course, Claude's fighting. But this friend of his has started smoking weed pretty regular, right? So I seen his attitude change. I overheard him talking to my son about Claude had a fight and he lost the fight, but it was a good fight. And this guy, I can't remember what this guy said, but it was anything but encouraging him. And I told
Mm,
him, I said, hey, I said, I think you probably need to distance yourself from this guy because he's not trying to build you up. Do you remember what he said? So I tried to point out to him what the guy said. He was actually kind of cutting him down instead of building him up. His brothers build him up. They all work. They're half Spanish, so I think it must be a Spanish thing because my brother and I weren't like that. But these guys are like friends. They really bond together. There's 5 of them, so they build each other up and talk each other up. But this friend of his, he's had for years, or was his friend. His attitude has changed because of the weed, I suppose. Nothing against weed, but he seems to have changed. So I told him about it and helped him to to see what was going on. He recognized it too. So he's limited his time with that guy, or actually cut it off. So really all you can do, because sometimes you can't really, if they like somebody, you got to be careful how you talk to them about their friends. But my kids are pretty open-minded. They know I don't try to run their life, but of course I have to guide them, and they realize that's what I try to do, because my parents didn't try to run my life. Sometimes I wish they would have, or I think they should have said more to me, but I probably wouldn't have listened. So that's really, you just got to kind of watch what's going on. And I get to spend a lot of time with my kids, like I said, because I've always worked for myself, and just knowing who their friends are, what's going on in their life. I've told them that some people I don't want over here for certain reasons. And sometimes they've told me when their brothers had friends over here, said they were doing certain things, these friends, I said, so, we don't need that person over there because of what one of the boys told me. So you got to kind of try to guide them and keep away the people, because we have a lot of kids come here, with me having 6 kids here. A lot of times the police have been here because kids will run away, and somehow tell them they're over here and they're not here. But it's really kind of it doesn't stay too exciting. But yeah, I could tell you some stories about the police coming over here because so many kids come here. Not that anybody's been in any real trouble, but a lot of kids come here because I'm here every day and they find stability here. And so many of them are in toxic homes where the mom or dad's in jail, or they've died from overdoses, or they're living with grandma and grandpa. And the kids tell me they find this to be more like a home. I don't know that, but that's what they say. So there's a lot of kids growing up out there without a mom and dad, without a father. And it's really, and that's one of the reasons I started my channel too, was to try to share my life experience with the younger people, because I've had mentors most of my life, and not my father, but other men. And well, my father did mentor me unknowingly, but so it's very important. A lot of guys want to change the world, but we can influence those young men around us, and we don't know what they're going to do in the world. So that's where we can start to change this lack of masculinity, or if you don't like the way things are in the States with marriages and divorces or whatever, we have to mentor these young men by example first, because as they say, more truth is caught than taught.
Ooh, that's really good. Like,
Yeah, I'm gonna have to remember that one.
Yeah,
That was good. I like that.
yeah, and
That's a step above lead by example. But I think that goes back to what you were saying, Mark, is, lead by example. I'm getting middle-aged now, mid-40s, and I'm
Young
dealing
man.
with a lot of guys, 20 years younger than me, and they seem to be very responsive to our life experiences, which is great. It's kind of hard to listen to a family member sometimes, because I remember when I was a teenager, my parents didn't know anything. I knew everything. My problem was I didn't know what I didn't know. Thought I knew everything, but I didn't know shit. That's the best way I could say it. So I learned a lot of lessons the hard way, unfortunately. But there's still lessons learned in their own right. But that's what's great about the communities that are starting to pop up, like Men of Now, and there's some other great ones out there too. For the men that grew up without a father, that grew up without positive, nurturing type influences. Not saying that we can give that to them, but we can help them with what they're lacking in their life that didn't give them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the power of the internet and virtual communities, and it's good for that. There's so many options now where it's like, hey, look, if you want to join ours to help lay out a plan and get you where you want to be, great. You want to join others that are focused on like much more specific things or topics or subjects, great. Like join all of them is what I say, because again, we're multifaceted individuals, and no one place is going to be a one-stop shop for you. But there definitely is a lot of great things that we've been doing in the community here. But it's also just great to see this sort of virtual landscape spring up to again give people that refuge, because kind of like in my parents' era, right? It was like you physically had to leave your city and go somewhere else to get out and escape your environment. You had to change it. And now at the your fingertips, it's a lot more available, a lot more accessible. So it's been really great to see.
Yeah, yeah. I had to run away from home to get away from the to get away from the toxic relationships and the stuff I was surrounded with. So it's definitely a changed world nowadays. Um, and that it kind of brings something up, Mark. And I never went down the path of children, so it's one of the reasons that I got involved with these communities, and I'm kind of like the cool uncle, like pass around some advice because I've got all of this stuff, all these lessons I've learned over my lifetime that I can share, but I don't have children to send them to or to give them to. So surrounding myself with young guys who are trying to learn, it feels good to give back. I had a
Yeah.
lot of mentors in my life. But a question I've got for you, Mark, is, even though I did grow up around, with a lot of different men around on the farm rural situation, and there was some good guidance from that, there also was a lot of toxicity. So, as a young guy who's around, maybe trapped in a toxic situation, you're 14 years old, 15 years old, if we have any of those viewers who are watching, if you're caught in a situation like that where you're in a home and you can't run away, you can't leave, you live in this and you're dealing with it, how do you go about, like, you as a father, how would you respect or appreciate somebody coming to you saying, listen, dad, this and this is wrong and we need to talk about it? Like, let's try and give some of these guys that advice. Like, how do you approach the subject from that standpoint for someone like yourself as a father? How would you be receptive to hearing it?
Do you mean like if one of my children came to me about something in my home or some kid?
Yeah, correct. So one of your children or one of your children's friends.
Well, if it's one of my children, they can come and talk to me, and that's what we do. We talk about what's going on. And sometimes that does happen because maybe one of the kids will be doing something that I don't know about, and they'll come and tell me about it because they are kids and they're doing things, or boys, whatever. They're grown men, some of them, but to me, they're still kids. So what I'll usually do is talk. I talk to them about it, and I try to stay away from, like one of you said, I try to stay away from telling them what to do. I
Mhm.
try to share my life experience with them as it relates to whatever situation they're involved in, so they can kind of get a feel what they might need to do. Two of my sons have mentors now, so I'm glad about that. And I know both of these men too. Um, Now, if it was a child from someone else's family, what I would probably tell them was to read and to stay in your room and stay away from as much as you can. Because if you have to live in the same house with them, of course, nowadays kids can pretty well disappear into the room with their phone or their iPad or whatever it happens to be.
Mm.
So,
That's a good point.
yeah, to try to stay away as much as you could and dive deep into something that catches your interest and try to escape, for lack of a better word,
Mhm.
from that toxicity. I mean, like if the let's say the mom and the dad's in the living room and they're fighting, or the two sisters are fighting, you don't have to stay in there. You can go to your room or go out to your friends or take a walk. I mean, well, that's about the only thing you can do there because you have to be in that home. I
Mhm.
moved out when I was 15 to stay with my grandma, and then by the time I was 17, I was living by myself. So I always wanted to get away from the alcoholism, even though my dad quit when I was about 13. Um, but yeah, that's about, and like I say, that's why I have a lot of kids come here. They'll stay for 2 or 3 days. When my oldest son was younger, there was a couple of them come here and lived here for probably 6 months because of the situation in their home. So that would be my best advice to somebody. And one of you mentioned too, with technology we have now on YouTube, you can find mentors. And, if you can't find somebody physically, there's a vast amount of information and wisdom on YouTube, and some stuff you don't want to listen to also. But we always have the good and the bad, depends how you want to use it.
Mhm.
But I remember long ago, I was talking to one of my old mentors, probably 32 years ago. I was over there crying about my girlfriend dumping me. He made me write a letter to her and told me to grab the shovel, made me go out to his garden and dig a hole and bury it. And he said, "You feel better now, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I do." And he said, "Well," he said, "when you get big and strong like me, you're going to pass this stuff on that I'm teaching you to other people like it was passed on to me." And he's long gone now. He was an old white headed Green Beret, had some horrible Vietnam stories. But And I always remember that. You remember certain little episodes in your life. I remember that guy looking at me and saying that, and that, like you said about, I get so much satisfaction out of that and joy from the service of sharing with other people and helping them.
Mm.
It gives me a lot of fulfillment. I mean, that's what we're all here for, to pass on what we've learned. How ignorant would we be if we didn't, if our forefathers hadn't have passed on what they learned to us?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true.
So well said. And I can even personally attest to that because, like Bentley and Josh know, we've all met about a year ago, I would say, in another group that we were all pretty much involved with, and then we've kind of evolved from that. But it showed me too that, hey, my life experience can help younger people. Well, not even just younger people, other men that need help, not just women, maybe too. So it's given me a newfound purpose, a new purpose to create, other than the fact that all the way to the fact that I'm now taking formal classes to get licensed to where I can actually give advice comfortably to the young men that join our group,
What?
and to help with that and get some more accreditation, because we do live in the West in 2024. You want to see that paper. My life experience is what's going to make me a good coach. However, the learning that I was going to make me a better coach. And
Right.
so, and joining a group like this and becoming a part of a group like this and meeting Bentley, we met in person.
Yep.
Me and Josh talk all the time. I mean, it for me, it gave me a new purpose to create, and something that I can do outside of my career that, like you said, it feels great to know when you give that young person the aha moment that clicks with them, that there's no better feeling as a man to give that to another man or a young man, however you want to look at that. But giving that aha moment and making a difference for them, especially as early as you can do it, it's a great thing to do.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the biggest.
that within you also. It reiterates what you need to know. I don't know if y'all believe in this or not, but whatever you put out there comes back to you. So you put that out, it comes back to you. You cannot give something away without it coming back to you multiplied. The same as you can't take something from people without that being taken from you multiplied down the road. But people don't usually put that together because it's a long time after and they don't think about what they've done to somebody or what they did for somebody. It's all about service and giving. The greatest successes in the world are the greatest servants. But people don't realize that because we're raised up to believe we have to go out and get what we want. And there's a certain amount of truth to that, but you really need to go out and give what you want.
Yeah, and the big thing too that I've honestly can say I'm like proud to be like members of this group and other groups as well, and what we've been working towards is that really what we want to do is give people out there hope, because again there's a lot of people out there that just they don't have like really, the situation just seems like a dead end. There's no light at the end of the tunnel, and it just like feels like it's hopeless and they're trapped and stuck. So we've all felt that at one way, shape, or form, or multiple times throughout our lives. So definitely want to reemphasize that fact that like, hey guys, there is hope out there. Like you're coming across this and you're at a low dark point. Like, hey, just reach out to any one of us. We're always will not turn you away. Like we're always down to listen, or at least help point you in the right direction. Because again, there's so many tools and so many resources out there available that in my eyes, there's no one should fall through the cracks and no one should slip behind. Like that should be a choice at this day and age with the amount of available resources. So, again, we want to just be able to put out that, message of positivity, but also that message of hope out there. Cause again, for a lot of folks, especially in very toxic situations with toxic family members, it just, seems like there is no hope out there. And, we want to give you guys some live examples of like, hey, no, there is out there and there are things that you can do. But sometimes you just have to, press through a little bit. But there are people out there rooting for you that have a vested interest in seeing you succeed.
Yeah, unfortunately, they'll grow up in that environment thinking that's normal, and they'll go out and recreate that in their life, unless they find out that that isn't how life really is. Because the way we're raised, we kind of think that's the way the world is. If a person is raised up in a situation where everybody lies, he just thinks everybody lies. But if you grow up in a home that's basically honest, you think most people are honest, and you actually go out and draw those types of people to recreate what you believe your view, what you view the world as, was that we don't believe what we don't see what how's it work? We don't see what we believe. No, we don't believe what we see what we believe. We create the world we believe exists.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, that perception does create reality. So sometimes if you just change your lens a little bit, then you can create a awesome reality. Kind of like shameless plug here, what we're doing in the Men of Now. So yeah, definitely excited to see what the guys will be doing over the course of this year. But definitely proud of a lot of the guys we have in there. And again, we got guys from all different walks of life. So some guys that are super successful, some guys that are just starting out on their journeys, and a lot of guys somewhere in between. So good to see like where everyone kind of grows. There's always room for growth. So we are coming up on the hour here, so I think it's a good spot to wrap. But it's been a fantastic conversation. I'll give everybody a round robin to let them know where they can find you, as well as how to best get in touch. And I know we had one viewer here that was curious about you, Mark. So we'll start with you first.
Yeah, it's a pleasure being here. Thanks for asking me. You can find me on Instagram at Mark's Inspiration, on YouTube at Mark Daniels, Mark's Inspiration. I'm on TikTok, I think Mark's Inspiration. And where else am I? I'm on X, but I don't do much there. So, yeah, you can find me at those places. And I will talk to you guys later. It's great being here. Thank you for
Yeah, it's
asking.
great to meet you, Mark. I hope we can do more work in the future.
My pleasure.
All right. Yes, Sir Bentley, where can the folks find you, connect with you?
Yeah, I I don't do a ton on social media, but I'm quite active on LinkedIn. You can see there. It's just linkedin.com, Bentley Ham. Reach out to me there, follow me, connect with me. Going to start picking up some more stuff on the socials. I'm a huge proponent, is something we've talked with today with the toxic people and stuff. I live by the mantra of, adversity does not happen to you; it happens for you.
Yeah,
Anytime something comes along, like a toxic person, like that, a situation in life, no matter what it is, that's an opportunity to actually grow from it and learn from it. So, no matter how bad something is, I always try to look for the positive in it, and see what can I learn from this, what can I grow from this, what skills am I going to develop, all those sorts of things, because that experience and that stuff is what's going to take you far in life. That's what's worked for me in my life.
And I'll definitely say, for those of you, like, definitely check them out on LinkedIn. That most recent post that you had on there was actually quite spectacular. Talking about the 20-year anniversary, that was a really profound, like, post that you had there. So definitely for a lot of folks out there, check that out. You'll see what kind of guy Bentley is, but also, we keep it real and we keep it pretty raw here. So no subject is off topic, no matter how like light or heavy it may be, because that's real life, and we help people get through life. So if you want to know the caliber of individual you're dealing with, definitely recommend checking out, connecting there.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Yeah, and I'm going to second that for Bentley too. And plus, you give courses on how to set LinkedIn up, which can tie into your resume, which can make you better, more marketable to the corporate world, wherever you want to go in. So I mean, he's a wealth of knowledge when it comes to marketing, and it's something that offers in the Men of Now. You get that basically by joining. I mean, you've got 6 experts in their fields at your disposal. Me, Kevin, I mean, I can say you got my Instagram right there, but I'm not very active on Instagram because I do more with the group. I consider myself the resident life advisor. I'm a huge financial freedom advocate, so I can help you with that. I've been debt-free, mortgage included, for the last 3 years, and I can help you set up budgets. I can help you set up a plan to financially level up in life. And that's what I want to bring to the table. And that's what I do bring to the table. So if you want to check it out, you owe it to yourself, menofnow.us.
All right. Yeah. And, again, thank you guys all for being here. Me, Renegade Wingman. You can find me at all socials at Renegade Wingman, or you can just go to my site if you ever want to just book a direct call with me. So always more than happy to set some time and chat, discuss. And, please feel free to mention this podcast, and I can give you a discount on my coaching rates. But more importantly, definitely check out Men of Now community, because to Kevin's point, you do have 6 experts in their field, all actively vested and working to help everybody in there, as well as everybody in there has been pretty dedicated and active in helping each other. So we learn a lot from the guys in there. They learn a lot from us. It's a very, very awesome thing that we're kind of building, and we're looking forward to growing and expand it. So for all you guys that are tuning in, check us out. Link is down there below. But I also want to sincerely thank you guys for watching this podcast, or for those of you guys that catch it on replay. Sincerely thank you for taking the time to watch. And we will catch you on another stream soon. You guys have a great one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, before you shut it off, remember to like, subscribe, and comment. That always helps us out. That's free. That doesn't cost you anything. It helps the
Absolutely.
channel.
Yeah.
There
Just wanted to say on behalf of everybody here, thanks for joining us, Mark. It was great to meet you today, and
My pleasure.
really appreciate it. It was
Likewise.
wonderful having you.